2 sets to love, 2-3, love 40. That is a long way back for Rafa.
January 30th, 2022, Melbourne Park. It's 1 in the morning, and Rafael Nadal, one of the greatest tennis players to ever pick up a racket, is getting absolutely cooked. He's down 2 sets to love and facing 3 break points at 2-3 in the third set against Daniil Medvedev. At this point, nobody, not even Carlos Moya, thought Rafa had a snowball's chance in hell. He's a soon-to-be 36-year-old coming off a chronic foot injury, running on fumes. And across the net, Daniil Medvedev, reigning US Open champion, the best hard-court player on the planet, on a 13-match Grand Slam winning streak, and completely in control. And yet, somehow, Nadal comes back. 5 sets, 5 hours, and 24 minutes.
It's the miracle in Melbourne.
The Tennis Hall of Fame later names it as the greatest single comeback in tennis history. When I went back through the record books, I found some pretty interesting matches that could give the Rafa 2022 AO comeback a run for its money. So which of these matches deserves the title of the greatest comeback in a match? Well, that depends on who you ask and what they value. Now, how do we measure a comeback? First, let's set the rules. Because not all comebacks are the same, and I'm not just throwing darts at a board here. For a comeback to be considered among the greatest of all time, it has to check these boxes. Starting with a deficit. I mean, that's the whole point of a comeback. You're basically digging yourself out of a hole. The larger the deficit, the greater the perceived value of the comeback. Coming back from 2 sets down, saving match points, both, that's the peak of it. What about the stakes? Was this a Grand Slam final, a big title to fight for, 2 rivals duking it out, a record, or a legacy on the line? You can come back from 2 sets down and nobody cares. But when the comeback happens on the biggest stage in the sport, it just hits different. Safe to say that early round comebacks in tournaments don't carry the same weight as comebacks in championship matches. What about the quality of the match itself? How good were the points, the rallies, the performance from both players? This one matters more than people give it credit for. But just as equally important is the 4th criterion: impact and drama. I know I speak for all tennis fans here when I say everyone loves some real drama. You could argue that the more the drama, the more memorable the match. So how dramatic was the comeback? How clutch was the performance? How wild were the momentum swings and the psychological warfare behind it all? And just how did it affect the players involved? Of course, we also have to acknowledge the fan experience and the impact on the sport's legacy in general. So with this framing in mind, which comeback is actually the greatest? Nadal had basically missed the second half of 2021 due to that chronic foot injury, and he came back to Melbourne without anyone really knowing what they were going to get. Medvedev, on the other side, was the man to beat. He had swept world number 1 Djokovic at the US Open without dropping a set. He was the favorite in the eyes of many fans, and everything that happened in the first 2 sets backed that up. Then came the 3rd set, where Nadal managed to dig himself out of a love 40 hole at 2-3. At this point, some of the probability models had Nadal winning at around 3%, and even the commentator said this.
Medvedev has got the hammer and nails out and is about to put the lid on the coffin.
But here's where things changed. Medvedev tightened up, had a look at the backhand he normally crushes cross-court, and dumped it long.
Out.
Then he tried a drop shot on breakpoint, and Nadal tracked it down. A tiny little crack, and Nadal just flooded through it. Medvedev had grown weary as the conditions slowed, and the longer rallies had now tipped in Rafa's favor. Add in some tactical adjustments from Nadal as well, and suddenly, the comeback no longer looked statistically impossible. Nadal won sets 3 and 4, and not long after, the comeback was complete. Rafa had now become the first player to win the Australian Open final from 2 sets down in the Open era, the second player to win all 4 majors twice in the Open era, the 6th oldest major champion, and perhaps most importantly, he had now broken the 3-way tie at 20 slams to become the winner of the most Grand Slams in history on the men's side at 21. As for the match, well, it had everything. The drama, quality, wild swings and momentum, and everything else you could have asked for. But if that's actually the case, then why is it that the Nadal-Medvedev match isn't universally regarded as the greatest comeback in history? Is it because Nadal didn't actually face a match point, or is it something else? Let's dig in a little deeper. This graph represents all matches from all the 4 Grand Slams from 1990 to 2024. Almost half of the best-of-5 matches ended in exactly 3 sets, and 31% of matches ended in 4. Only 19% of the matches went the distance all 5 sets. Of the 17,269 matches in this dataset, only 1,216, or 7%, had one player lead 2-zip and the other player coming back to force a 5th set. Of that 7%, only about 55% of that number actually came back to win the match. That's just 3.85%. Now, despite the stakes being higher and the quality of opponents being higher deep into the rounds, a comeback was more likely to occur in the final, likely in large part due to mental factors. And speaking of the mental factor, this was probably the largest intangible in this next comeback. June 6th, 1999. Roland Garros, career Grand Slam on the line. This one hits different because of who Andre Agassi was in 1999. Less than 2 years before this match, Agassi's ranking had bottomed out at world number 141. He'd privately admitted to drug use. His career looked done. Agassi only decided to play the French at the last minute after an injury. And yet, here he was, seeded 13th at the French Open, and now needing one win to become only the second man in the Open era, after Rod Laver, to complete the career Grand Slam. His opponent, Andre Medvedev. This guy was barely inside the top 100 and had literally been thinking about quitting tennis just a couple of months before this final. Ironically, Agassi himself had talked him out of it. And now, the guy was about to hand him arguably the worst loss of his career. Medvedev might have been in a rough spot in his career, but there was no doubting his status as one of the top clay courters in the game, and he set out to prove it early on at the French Open. He had beaten Sampras in the second round and topped 1997 French Open champion Gustavo Kuerten in the quarters. Now, looking at the Agassi match, Medvedev comes out firing. Takes the first set 6-1 in 19 minutes, like he was warming up. He then wins the second 6-2. In those 2 sets, Medvedev wins 100% of his first serve points. Agassi, one of the greatest returners to ever play the game, can't touch him. Now, here's where it gets interesting though. A rain delay occurs. Agassi's coach Brad Gilbert encourages him to start going for his shots more. And then something just clicks. Third set, Agassi saves breakpoint at 4-all.
Boy, that was a great volley.
And manages to steal the third set 6-4. He then gets the early break in the fourth and goes all the way. Medvedev's rhythm is broken, but he's hanging in there. The fifth set gets tense, but Agassi's championship big match experience takes over, and he gets the crucial break to go up 3-2. Agassi completes one of the most staggering comebacks the sport had ever seen on a surface where he had previously lost a couple of French Open finals. Agassi completes the career Grand Slam in a tournament he lost twice in the finals before and under the most improbable conditions. Just like Nadal-Medvedev, this one ticks all the boxes in terms of deficit, stakes, and drama. But you could argue that the Agassi win carried more weight. So is this the greatest tennis comeback in history? Well, it depends who you ask. June 6th, 2004. Roland Garros. Last year the tournament was up for grabs before the King of Clay's arrival. It's the tragic story of a match that probably broke a man. The story is a lot better than the tennis itself, in my opinion. Tournament favorite and clay court beast Guillermo Coria has only dropped one set en route to the final. He was up against his compatriot in the first all-Argentine Grand Slam final. Gaston Gaudio was an unseeded opponent ranked 44 in the world who wasn't even expected to make that deep of a run. Meanwhile, El Mago was world number 3 and was entering into the final with a 22-1 record on clay for the season. Both players hated each other and didn't hide that fact. The match kicks off with a bang, and Gaudio got bageled in the first set in just 24 minutes. It's not that Gaudio was necessarily playing badly, Coria was just too good. He took the second set 6-3 and was just one set away from glory. Being so one-sided, the Parisian crowd got bored and injected themselves into the action by the middle of the third set, doing the wave. Gaudio would later say that the wave gave him a breath of fresh air and allowed him to hit more freely and enjoy himself on the court. Gaudio held serve for 4-all and began to involve the crowd more and more. Coria then went up 40-love in the next service game, but began to show signs of nerves and couldn't get over the line. From that point on, the choking started. He was also now dealing with cramps, and Gaudio would win 9 points in a row to steal the third set. The fourth wasn't even really a contest. Coria could barely move, and Gaudio seized it 6-1.
Niente, non si muove, non si è mosso negli ultimi...
With everything on the line in the decider, Coria managed to build a 4-2 lead and even went on to serve for the match twice. The first time, though, he gets broken to love. The second time, he held 2 match points. In both of those rallies, he pulled the trigger down the line, but missed wide by a couple of inches. He was maybe just a fraction of a second and a fraction of a nerve late on both shots.
Ancora un lungo...
Gaudio survived and went on to win the decider 8-6.
Lascia andare il suo meraviglioso rovescio.
Meanwhile, Coria was never the same. He would never reach another slam final, and by 2006, he had all but vanished. That year, he would lose 8 times in the first round, suffering from shoulder problems and service yips that would never be cured. In fact, he averaged nearly 12 double faults per match. He ended up retiring in 2009 at the age of 27. Was it the biggest choke in tennis history? Meanwhile, Gaudio held it together for a bit, but wouldn't win another title or reach another Grand Slam quarterfinal after 2005. At the French Open in 2005, in sort of a cosmic comeuppance, Gaudio was up 4-love against David Ferrer in the 5th set before losing 6 straight games. By 2007, he was outside of the top 100. By 2008, he was out of the game. Maybe the 2004 French Open was cursed. The quality was lacking in some of the sets, but in terms of pure drama, entertainment, how large the deficit was, and the raw human tragedy baked into it, you could argue that Coria Gaudio is deserving of the title. But good luck telling that to the OG tennis fans who have been watching the sport before you, or maybe even I was born. Because 2 decades earlier, they saw something at the exact same tournament. You see, John McEnroe was untouchable in 1984. He was riding a 42-match winning streak, the best start to a season in the Open era, and was in the midst of one of the greatest ever seasons in tennis history. 5 of McEnroe's 42 match wins had come against Lendl himself. Lendl had also lost all 4 of his previous Grand Slam appearances and had notoriously fallen apart in the later stage of these matches. McEnroe was the artist. Lendl was the mechanical baseliner, and it showed early. Under the harsh sunlight that baked the clay court, McEnroe grabbed the first 2 sets 6-3, 6-2. And it genuinely looked like he was going to run through Lendl without breaking a sweat. Lendl looked out of his element, and the final seemed like a foregone conclusion.
Well, history tells us that it's unlikely we'll get a 5-set final.
But here's the thing. As insanely talented as J-Mac was, he was just as temperamental, and all it took was a cameraman's headset going off near the court to flip a switch early on in the 3rd set. Lendl held from love 30 to go up 2-1 and would break McEnroe in the 6th game. With McEnroe's momentum now broken, it became a sparkling, emotional endurance contest that seesawed until Lendl made the final break. The already pro-Lendl crowd had also become a lot more vociferous, and McEnroe would later admit that the crowd's reaction had actually worked against him. With McEnroe appearing to tire after dropping the 3rd set, Lendl's strategy was simple: to pin the American to the baseline and prevent him from going on the attack. Though McEnroe salvaged some points by rushing the net, Lendl, particularly with his backhand, was able to put many returns out of his reach. Just take a look at the number of times McEnroe attacked the net. You don't see stuff like this nowadays, do you? Lendl took the 4th set to level the scores, and like the rest of the match, the 5th set went back and forth. Lendl was often scoring with cross-court drives, and McEnroe was putting away shots at the net. McEnroe held the 5-5, but Lendl, on a roll, took the 11th game to love. In the 12th game, what was left of McEnroe's skill at the net deserted him as he tiredly knocked an easy forehand put-away volley out of the court. McEnroe's temperament had cost him the biggest miss of his career and the chance to become the first American man to win the French Open since 1955. McEnroe later said he had injured himself slightly when he fell while reaching for a shot. But he didn't blame the injury for his defeat. It was the worst loss of his life, and McEnroe would never win the French Open.
It's by far the most disappointing loss in my career because I actually believed that I could play on that surface.
But for Lendl, it was the first of many Grand Slams.
Ivan Lendl has finally won a Grand Slam championship.
In terms of the quality of tennis, the '84 final is right up there. The stakes were as high as they could be for both men, and there was some pretty crazy drama to it as well, so it totally belongs on this list. But this next one was just as crazy. July 14th, 2019, Wimbledon Center Court. The longest Wimbledon final in history. 2 of the greatest players of all time, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Roger Federer, 8-time Wimbledon champion, arguably the greatest player in the history of the sport, is serving for his 9th title at 37 years old. He's just beaten Nadal in the semis and is looking to go a step further. His opponent, Novak Djokovic, is playing the worst statistical match of the two. But somehow, someway, he's still hanging around. They both split the first 4 sets. And then, in the 5th, it all comes down to this moment. Federer holds 2 championship points. On the first one, Federer lands a second serve, but Nole rushes him on the return. And the second match point, even better from Djokovic. Against all odds, Djokovic goes on to win the match.
And that's it.
No man had saved match points to win a Wimbledon final since 1948. Federer hit 94 winners, 40 more than Novak, had more total points, more breaks of serve, better percentages in basically every single category than his opponent. Yet, the king of grass just couldn't put Novak away. That's just how clutch Novak was. He somehow found a way to play the pressure points better, and the tiebreaks even better than that. In terms of stakes and drama, this match had it all. In terms of pure quality alone, maybe not the best Wimbledon final, because we can put the 2008, 1980, and maybe 1 or 2 other finals above it. But simply looking at its significance in history and the other intangibles between the greatest players of all time, this one has to make the cut. It's not just that Djokovic saved 2 championship points. It's the combination of factors that makes this one truly special. Djokovic was playing Federer on grass at Wimbledon. Federer was 37 and he never won another Grand Slam. That was his real last shot. He retired in 2022 and quickly found himself behind Djokovic and Nadal in the total Grand Slam tally. And then there's this one. Still fresh, still impossible to fully process. June 8th, 2025, Court Philippe Chatrier. The moment we witnessed the passing of the torch. The Roland Garros ceremony had literally opened with Nadal saying goodbye to the sport on the same court, and Djokovic hinted at the fact that he didn't have too many more years left at the top either. Yet, just a few days later, Sinner and Alcaraz managed to play the kind of match that would have made their predecessors proud. Both men had gone undefeated in their Grand Slam finals going in. Alcaraz at 4-0 and Sinner at 3-0. Their 12 career meetings had never included a major final, until now. For the majority of the first 4 sets, this felt less like a classic and more like the coronation of a new multi-surface king. And that king didn't look like Alcaraz. Sinner raced to a 2-sets-to-love lead, and then, at 3-5 in the 4th, Sinner reached triple championship point at love 40. However, Alcaraz forced Sinner to beat him, and Sinner couldn't do it. The 3 match points, erased. Alcaraz rampaged through the 4th set tiebreak, got an early break in the 5th, and then, after failing to serve it out at 5-4, composed himself and dominated the super tiebreak 10-2 to win the match. 5 hours and 29 minutes, the longest Roland Garros final in history. What makes this one feel different from everything else on this list is the context layered around it. This was generational succession happening in real time, on the most iconic clay court in the world. The quality was elite from both sides, and each staged their own improbable comeback within the same match. Is this the match that finally settles the debate? Of course, we couldn't fit everything. So let's give some flowers to the ones that nearly made the cut. Sampras and Courier's 1995 AO clash wasn't a final, but it belongs in the conversation. Sampras found out just before the match that his coach Tim Gullikson had been diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. Sampras was emotional all match, struggled to keep it together, and literally broke down crying even on court. Sampras lost the first 2 sets in tiebreaks, but still came back to win in 5. Truly special. Connors Pernfors 1987 Wimbledon 4th round. Connors, in the twilight of his career, trailed 6-1, 6-1, 4-1 to the Swede. The comeback was, safe to say, statistically improbable. Well, until the dog in Connors kicked in, and he roared back, snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. Still one of the most physically and mentally absurd turnarounds in the sport's history. Let's also throw in Murray versus Verdasco's Wimbledon 2013 quarterfinal. After 5 Grand Slam final defeats, few expected Andy Murray to become Wimbledon champion via a straight sets victory over the reigning #1 Djokovic. However, just 4 days earlier, he was on the verge of defeat to Fernando Verdasco. After Verdasco grabbed the first 2 sets, the odds of Murray surviving the match, let alone getting the Grand Slam monkey off his back, seemed remote. However, Murray dug deep into his bag of tricks and found a way in the end. There's a reason Andy Murray holds the record for the most comebacks from 2 sets down in men's tennis in the Open era with 11. For a 3-year stretch, from 1975 to 1977, the US Open was actually played on clay. Manuel Orantes was up against Guillermo Vilas and quickly found himself down 2 sets to love. Orantes regrouped to take the third, but soon fell behind love 5, 15-40 down in the 4th. How he managed to save match points and recover from multiple breaks and win the match in 5, and then go on to defeat the defending champion Jimmy Connors a day later in the final, is well and truly beyond me. And then there's the 17-year-old Michael Chang versus Lendl at the 1989 French Open, Borg versus Orantes French Open in 1974, and of course, a few others. Here's what makes tennis unlike any other sport. You can be 1 point away from losing everything and still win. There's no clock running out, no free throw you can just bank off the glass. Sorry, SGA fans. In tennis, every single point is its own moment of truth, and the mental weight of that just compounds over time. That's the game, and that's why we love it. So, going back to our comeback criteria, who's truly deserving of the greatest comeback in history in a match? Well, I don't think we have a unanimous answer, but I'm gonna have to go with Sinner Alcaraz. And before you all come at me in the comments saying, Noah, you're crazy, what do you even know about tennis? No, it's not even recency bias. It checks every single box at the highest possible level. Both men came in with perfect Grand Slam final records. Triple championship point erased, the longest Roland Garros final ever. Elite quality from both sides the entire way. And the generational context. Nadal's farewell literally happening on the same court days earlier makes the backdrop unlike anything else on this list. The Djokovic comeback lacked a 2 sets down deficit, which limits the raw comeback factor, and plus the quality wasn't exactly a 10 out of 10 to be fair. Nadal-Medvedev, no match points saved, which slightly reduces the cliff's edge drama. What about Agassi's comeback? Andre Medvedev, while still dangerous on clay, wasn't exactly the dominant force some of the other losers on this list were. Lendl's comeback heavily relied on McEnroe's psychological collapse more than anything else. And Coria Gaudio just didn't have the same quality as some of these other comebacks. Now with that all said, do y'all agree with my choice? Which of these matches truly deserves the title of the greatest comeback in a match? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks guys for tuning in. As always, I appreciate your support here on the channel. I'm actually going to France in a few weeks to cover the French Open in person and tell a few stories that I've wanted to do for some time, and I can't wait to share more with all of you. Be sure to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications so you don't miss a thing that we're doing here at Courtside Tennis. And until next time, keep going for the lines.